All right, so here I am driving back from Parker, and I figured, well, I got some time to kill as I'm heading back, so maybe I would get this vodcast all squared away on Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. And the thing with Abraham Maslow is he was a psychologist. He was probably one of the more radical thinkers of his day. He was born a long time ago. I think he died in 1970. So he kind of was the founder of what they call, I think, humanistic theology or humanistic psychology, that kind of stuff. What made him radical in his day is usually people in the psychological world, they're psychologists, that kind of stuff. They primarily are associated with people who are dealing with illnesses and being sick and mentally ill, schizophrenia, things like that. And they try to figure out what happened and why this person is the way that they are. And what Maslow decided to do was, instead of trying to figure out why people weren't well, why people were sick, he tried to figure out how come people weren't sick. Why were there people that were thriving? There were people who were very successful and didn't have any of these mental illnesses. How come they could survive, or they made it without these problems, and other people, did? So what he did was he went out in his research and his studies, he started to notice some very specific trends in terms of what people had that were consistent with being mentally well. And that's where his hierarchy came from. And he uses his hierarchy because it's an important concept. It's not just because it looks nice. It looks like a birthday cake. And it's not just because it was a nice shape to fit, all his little words and stuff in there. It was actually a reason for that. And the way a hierarchy works is that everything builds on top of the next level. Just like you make a cake, you start with the bottom level and you put another layer on and you put another layer on. You don't start a cake with the top of the cake first. And that's kind of how this hierarchy works. And we have a lot of things that are examples of hierarchies, like the military. Everybody starts out as a private, and they work their way up. You don't go into the military as a 4-star general. You work your way up there. Same thing in the circle of life stuff. You've got the grass, and then the antelope eat the grass, and then the lions eat the antelope, and then and so everything kind of works its way up the food chain. And so that's kind of how this works. And so on the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, the main base that has to be present in order for any of us to be mentally well is what he called physiological needs, or physical needs. And this is your basic food, water, shelter. If you're not getting food, water, shelter, then the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. I'm going to spend all my time focusing on those things because they're foundational. And so that's the basic foundation of this entire hierarchy. None of the rest of this hierarchy matters if I don't have a consistent source of food, water, shelter. That's going to consume my time. It's going to consume my thoughts, and that's why that's at the base. Once I have food, water, shelter needs met, then the next level in Maslow's hierarchy is what we call safety, security needs. And safety, security needs are simply that. It's I need to feel safe and secure both physically and emotionally. It's not just one or the other. And you can see this in, like, if you're lost in the woods, let's say, you're hunting and you somehow get turned around in the woods, or you're hiking and you get lost. The first priority is usually shelter. Okay, depending on how long you're out there, food, water, shelter, and depending on the climate, one of those is going to take priority over the others. And then once you've established a sense of food, water, shelter, so now I know, I've got a source of water. There's a stream nearby. I can catch fish. I have a fort that I've built that gives me some protection from the elements. Now I start worrying about protection. I start worrying about security. How am I going to protect myself if an animal, a predator comes around? So then that's the next step. Now, if I don't have my food, water, shelter needs taken care of, I will risk safety and security to get those needs met. I will, do something that potentially could injure or kill me in order to get my food, water, shelter needs met. So now the third level is our belonging needs, our sense of love and affection. And Maslow called that belonging. And what that is that now this is where the relationship stuff comes into play. I need to have some kind of connection with another human being. It doesn't mean that I have to be super popular. It doesn't mean that I have to have lots of friends, but I do need to have some type of a human interaction, some type of human connection to have a sense of belonging, a sense of security in a relationship. Next in Maslow's hierarchy is what we call esteem needs. And you could say self-esteem, but this is going to be my ability to feel good about who I am, to have some pride, to have a sense of purpose, that my life has meaning and that I contribute. So that's what esteem needs are. And then the last tier on Maslow's hierarchy is what Maslow calls self-actualization. A lot of times I use the term self-ideal. And if you flip those two words around, it becomes your ideal self. And so what self-actualization means is reaching that full potential. When you think in your head of who you want to be at the pinnacle of your life, that's an example of what your self-ideal is. Reaching that full potential, that not only do you benefit from the decisions that you're making for your life and that you're doing your life, but also other people are benefiting. You are enriching other lives as well. And that's part of what Maslow would define as what he called self-actualization. Now, in all honesty, only about 2% to 3% of the population, Maslow would say, is truly self-actualized. A lot of times, most of us dabble in it. We get to that point, we kind of hang out there for a little bit, and then due to environmental situations or due to poor decision making or something, we tend to move back down into that esteem needs area. And so these are the different stages in the hierarchy. And how this hierarchy works is that we start off at the bottom. When we're born, the big thing is food, water, shelter, and safety, security, and the human relationships, the bond that we have with our families. And if we look at those bottom three levels, you'll find that families should provide those needs for us, that everybody should be starting at the same level. We should all be at starting out at esteem needs. That's what we should be working on. And not all families are like that. Some people, grow up in a pretty rough neighborhood. They grow up in a pretty rough family situation, and mom and dad aren't providing those things. So what do you do at that point? Well, what Maslow would say is that there's other places where you can get these needs met. Grandparents' house, a friend's house, a friend's family. I mean, some of you maybe have a stronger bond with your friend's parents than with your own parents, and that's a way for you to get needs met, in a way other than what we might traditionally see, in most cases. And so what it means is that just because those needs aren't presented in the most traditional manner, you can still get those needs met elsewhere. And so in life, that's where we need to start out. But does that mean that if I'm born into a situation, let's say, of homelessness, all right, does that mean I can't be successful? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that I'm going to have to do some things differently than someone else who doesn't have that issue. A lot of people say, well, if you're born into money, life is a lot easier, and in some cases that might be. But does that mean that someone who's born poor can't develop wealth? There's lots of examples where that's happened. Oprah Winfrey, for example. She was born in the slums of Chicago and moved to Milwaukee when she was a little girl. She was one of, a bunch of kids. She didn't have a dad. She was born in a pretty rough situation, and as a result of decisions that she made and things that she did with her life, she now is probably one of the wealthiest women in the history of the United States, possibly in the history of the world. But she came from very, very, very humble, rough beginnings. So all it means is that we can sit around and pout about life not being fair, and if only I had money, or if only things were different, then my life would be fine. But let's go back to the lesson we learned about internal versus external control. That would be an example of someone who's operating externally. If my life were different, then I would be successful. Whereas internal would say, it doesn't matter the situation I'm in, the decisions I make are a bigger deal than the situation that I'm living in. And that's how the internal-external stuff impacts Maslow's hierarchy, and it's kind of why these two dovetail together really nice, is that if I'm operating under that guise of internal sense of control, that internal attitude of saying, you know what, I may not have these needs met, but I'm going to keep working towards them. I'm going to go get these needs met. I'm going to do things differently than what other people need to, and I'm not going to gripe and complain about it. Those are the people that move up in Maslow's hierarchy. Those are the people that tend to reach those pinnacles and have those successful experiences. Those are the people also who maybe deal with environmental problems and they're able to get right back on their feet again. Take Hurricane Katrina, for example. People were just wiped out. There are people who were at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, had the tiger by the tail, so to speak, in terms of life, and then Katrina came and just wiped everybody out. Everybody started out on the ground floor again. Everybody was worried about safety, security, physical needs, food, water, shelter. That was a priority for everybody. Nobody cared about their 50-inch TVs anymore. They didn't care about their 401ks at that point. They were worried about getting fresh water, food, and shelter for their families. Now, more than likely, people who were at the top of Maslow's hierarchy when Hurricane Katrina hit, it didn't take them very long for them to get back to the top of the hierarchy. And you might ask why? Well, it's pretty simple. They've done it before. They knew exactly what they needed to do in order for them to get back on top because they had a blueprint. They've done it before. They knew what kinds of steps they had to take. They knew what they needed to do. And then they just followed through and did it. If someone wasn't at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, maybe they were stuck somewhere in the middle. Maybe they were somewhere near the bottom. When Hurricane Katrina hit, maybe they didn't lose quite as much, but they probably didn't go a whole lot further than they were because they didn't know how to get to where these other people were at just because they didn't have those experiences. And so when we talk about Maslow and we talk about this hierarchy of needs, it helps us understand where we're stuck. And if we're stuck at a level, what it typically means is that we're lacking something in the level below it. For example, if we don't feel safe and secure, maybe part of that issue is that there's some instability in terms of my physical needs. Maybe if I'm having problems in relationships, maybe if I tend to be a person that is bouncing around between relationship to relationship, or I constantly always seem to be getting involved with losers or people who treat me bad, maybe it's because there's some safety security issues that I haven't dealt with. And so those are some things we can take a look at to help us in our life situations to improve our situation, our status, and say, hey, wait a minute, I may not need to focus on relationships as much as I need to focus on safety security issues and really take a look at that. And so that's kind of how Maslow's hierarchy works, is that we move kind of up and down through this hierarchy in that order. Well, I should say we can move down in any order, but we build ourselves back up through that same hierarchy that we started with. But it gives us a little bit of a blueprint of what kinds of needs have to get met in order for us to be mentally well, for us to even be emotionally well and be able to thrive, not just survive, but be able to thrive in this life. And so using the internal sense of control, that internal thought process of if I want to move, I can move. It just might mean I have to do some things different than the guy that lives down the street. And so we have to keep that in perspective. So try to figure out where you're at on Maslow's hierarchy. Take a look at the needs that are being met, the needs that you need to get met. Take a hold of that wheel, drive your bus. Don't let someone else drive your bus for you so that you can have some control over where you want to go and where you're going to wind up ending up in terms of your life goals and your plans, dreams, hopes, desires, all those things. A lot of times people who just sit around and expect the world to change for them or expect the world to provide stuff for them, things just don't work out that well. That's not a very secure place to be in terms of those security needs, is to let somebody else make all the decisions for me. I don't really think that that's a place that I would want to be at. So drive your bus, work your way up those levels, and if you feel like you're stuck somewhere, take a look at that level below and say, hey, am I struggling with some of those areas back there? So there you go. I'm almost to school. I've kind of driven around a little bit. Traeger out.